The headline on the magazine was a small, gaudy thing folded into the tray table in front of me. Glossy paper, screaming type, the kind of certainty that never sounded like an apology. It called itself news. It called itself revelation. I turned it over and covered the title with my hand. The woman across the aisle glanced at me, then back to her own book, polite as always. We were 3 hours from New York. We were the faintly restless penumbra between the domestic and the personal. The plane hummed. The lights flickered in a careful mimicry of the sun. And then the person the article was about walked past us in a denim jacket and sneakers that could have been plucked from any suburban mall, an ordinary disguise that somehow made everything else more impossible to ignore. She smiled and apologized, not because she had to, but because she always did. When she sat down in the row behind me, a sudden rawness came over the plane like spilled perfume. People shifted, cameras of eyes adjusted. Because she is Kelly Ripa, familiar, luminous, the woman who has been in living rooms so long she feels like family to strangers. She settled into the seat and exhaled. Beneath the denim, under the practiced armor of shoulder-length hair and a familiar laugh that could lift an otherwise flat elevator, there was a kind of human unknowing that made her suddenly less like a celebrity and more like any of us with our quiet burdens. I had no business listening. I do not know how I came to be seated as I was, 3 rows ahead, working on a piece that had nothing to do with her. But stories, as they say, have a mind of their own. The person next to Kelly, someone I later learned was a production assistant with a kind, gentle face, was fanning herself with a magazine. For a moment I saw the two of them as if from a stage, an older woman and a younger one, both in various degrees of exhaustion. Then the aircraft made a shallow dip, and a woman behind them let out a small, involuntary laugh. The sound was a key. Doors seemed to open. Kelly closed her eyes, and when she did, the practiced smile fell away entirely. That was the moment the confession began. At first it was little things, an aside about a flight delay, a joke about airplane food. Then the conversation loosened into a kind of confidences only I'll. She spoke quietly, not trying to hide, but not inviting notice either. She mentioned the familiar ache of being reduced to a sentence in a viral headline. They'll write anything, she said. Anything sells. Like what? The assistant asked. Kelly paused. Like the way they think they know me, because they've seen my hair move on a treadmill or watch me make pancakes on a morning show. It becomes all-consuming. People think intimacy is a brand. They think they can own my choices. She laughed softly, but it was short and not amused. I scribbled a note in the corner of my pad. She's tired of being owned. The person sitting next to me thought I was taking travel notes. I wasn't. I was trying to mark where the real story, if stories can be called real, penciled itself onto the world. What do they say now? The assistant asked, curiosity pure as a child's. Kelly's hand went to the inside of her jacket, to the place where a label might sit or a seam might bite. She took a breath that sounded like someone steadying a boat in a squall. They say all kinds of things. Lately they're asking why I don't wear a bra. A hush seemed to fall over their little cluster of seats. Somewhere far back a cartoon on someone's tablet laughed. Up front, the pilot's voice crackled with benign updates on the weather. On the plane, the world continued. Inside the conversation, there was a small, intimate collapse. Why would they care? The assistant asked, half bewildered, half amused. Isn't that on none of their business? She looked at the assistant for a long time, and then at the window where clouds were rewriting themselves in layers of pearled silver. Yes, she said. But when you're visible, when your body becomes a metaphor for all sorts of other things, control, sexuality, power, people start to think they have a stake. She tapped the denim with 2 fingers. They want to make up a narrative that's convenient for them. They think it explains my life. It never does. What is the narrative? The assistant asked. Kelly huffed a small, rueful breath. That I'm provocative or reckless, or that it's a publicity stunt. Or they'll say I'm being feminist and doing it on purpose. Or they'll say it's a comfort thing and nothing more. None of those are true. At least, none of them tell the whole truth. The phone in front of me vibrated. I did not check it. This was a private moment that somehow wore the ridiculous illumination of public life. Trust is an odd currency on planes, as if the altitude itself lends permission for the confessional. Beside me, the woman finishing her audiobook pretended not to hear. In the back, the child poked at the safety card like a small, persistent archaeologist. Kelly's voice when she spoke again lost its measured tone and became tender, as if she were telling a story to someone she needed to stay near. When people ask me that question, why I don't wear a bra, they mean more than the garment. They're asking, why not follow the rules we've made for women's bodies? They mean, why don't you conform? It's easier to make a joke out of my private choices than to look at why the rules exist in the first place. She told a story. It began in a dressing room years ago. An assistant had said something offhand. You'll want something that lifts and supports and keeps everything where it should be, as if the body were a thing easily rearranged for someone else's convenience. The memory came back to her as if it had been scripted, but Kelly's story always left space for improvisation within the beat. I remember thinking, who are you to rearrange me? She said. Who appointed anyone the curator of my comfort? Her voice threaded into a childhood memory then, of her mother fastening buttons, of a grandmother smoothing a dress, of a small girl learning how to present herself so the world would reward her for it. It felt like a relay race, she said. Someone passes it down, someone else takes it, and you run without questioning the baton. The assistant, who had a luminous, startled face, asked, was it a conscious rebellion? Kelly smiled, but it wasn't triumphant. No. It was progressive, or maybe lazy, or maybe it was the first honest thing I'd done in a long time. I was 13 and the sports bra I wore for gym class felt like a cage. I cut out the elastic and walked home with it hanging from my bag. I wasn't saying anything about the world. I was just saying, I'll make myself comfortable enough to breathe. There is more to it than mere comfort. She talked about a love of all things, lovers' comments that were supposed to be compliments but landed like directions, keep it modest. They would say, or alternatively, show it off. Men and culture offered contradictory commandments and expected women to obey both simultaneously. We're taught you can't win, she said. You can be both punished and rewarded for the very same behavior, depending on who's watching. She told of a season on television when the wardrobe department began measuring her as if she were a project. It was clinical. They measured curves and straps like we were building a costume for someone else, she said, and the small plane lights made the word costume sound theatrical and precise. At first I complied because it felt easier, less to think about. But then compliance started to feel like self-erasure. She described tiny acts of reclaiming, a morning when she refused to wear a garment because it pinched, a rehearsal where she told the wardrobe manager she would dress herself. Those moments built up like soft cash in a jar. They did not explode into a manifesto. They accumulated, until one morning she realized she stopped caring whether a stranger on the street thought she was improper. People assume those choices are statements, she said. They turn it into performance. I didn't think of it as a statement. I thought of it as removing an irritant. The world expects us to be polished. What if I want to be plain? What if I want breath? There's no headline in that. Her tone sharpened then, not in anger, but in something like alarm. And yet, the internet turned it into an accusation, she said. It's as if a garment's presence or absence gives permission to 1,000 opinions. Suddenly, I was not a person, but an example used to justify someone else's belief system. At that, she laughed, soft and bitter. Someone had the gall to claim that my choice to be comfortable was either a moral failing or a political act. If I say I prefer comfort, I'm automatically aligned with a movement, an ideology, or a scandal. Why can't it simply be small and private? A man across the aisle cleared his throat and offered earphones. A woman 2 rows back sneezed. We went on with our little lives while Kelly built a map of what the word private had meant to her across the years. She spoke about motherhood, careful, precise, and the strangled sense of being observed even in the most ordinary moments. When she spoke of her child, it was a bright, defiant thing. Her voice softened like sunlight through curtains. You realize how much of yourself you have to give, all the ways your own.